Michael Moore is on the move. On Wednesday, the Academy Award-winning filmmaker will testify on Capitol Hill. He then heads to New Hampshire to challenge presidential candidates, Democrat and Republican, over the nation's healthcare system. Oh, and his latest documentary, SiCKO, is being released in thousands of theaters next week. The film is a seething indictment of the U.S. healthcare system. It focuses not on the more than 40 million people who don't have health insurance, but on the more than 250 million who do, many of whom are abandoned by the very health insurance industry they've paid into for decades. Yesterday, I sat down with Michael Moore at the Tribeca Cinema here in New York, just after he'd done a sneak preview for 9/11 workers who fell ill after working in the toxic environment at Ground Zero. He was then doing a fundraiser for the Center for Justice and Democracy, a tort reform group. I began by asking Michael Moore what inspired him to make the film.
Well, I had a TV show on back in the 90s called TV Nation, and one day I thought it'd be interesting to have like a race. So we sent a camera crew to an emergency room in Fort Lauderdale, a camera crew to an emergency room in Toronto, and then one to Havana. And they were to each wait until someone came in with a broken arm or a broken leg. And then they were going to follow that person through and see how good the quality of the care was, how fast it was, and how cheap it was. And I convinced Bob Costas and Ahmad Rashad, sportscasters, to do the play-by-play of what we called the Healthcare Olympics. And so it was a race between the US, Canada, and Cuba. And to make a long story short, Cuba won. They had the fastest care, the best care, and it cost nothing. We turned the show into NBC that week, and I get a call from the censor. They're not called the censor, they're called Standards and Practices. And so this woman calls, she's the head of Standards and Practices, Dr. somebody. I don't know why she actually had a doctor before her name, but I forget her last name now. But she calls and she says, Mike, Cuba can't win. I said, what? Cuba can't win. Well, they won. What do you mean they can't win? They won. No, we can't say that on NBC. We can't say that Cuba won. Yeah, but they won. They provided the fastest care. They were the cheapest, and the patient was happy, and the bone got fixed. No, it's against regulations here. I said, oh, well, I'm not changing it. Well, they changed it. They changed it 2 days later when it aired. They changed it so that Canada won. And Canada didn't win. Canada almost won, but they charged the guy $15 for some crutches on the way out. So it's bugged me to this day that anybody who saw that episode, where it said, and Canada won the Healthcare Olympics, and in fact, it was Cuba. But it couldn't be said on NBC because God knows what would happen. So anyways, I first started thinking about this issue then, and then when I had my next show, The Awful Truth, we followed a guy who had health insurance, but his health insurance company would not approve this operation he needed, which would save his life. So we took the guy to the headquarters of Humana, the HMO down in Louisville, Kentucky. Took him in to see the executives there. They gave us the boot. So we went out on the lawn and conducted the man's funeral with him present. So we had a priest and a casket and pallbearers, bagpipes, and Amazing Grace and the whole deal. And the executives are looking down from the top floor at this and horrified. This is going to air on national television. 3 days later, they call and tell the guy, we'll approve the operation, and the man is alive today. And I thought at the time, geez, a 10-minute piece, we saved a guy's life. What could we do if we did a 2-hour movie? And so that was the sort of the genesis of this. Though the movie didn't end up being a bunch of stories about, saving individual people's lives, because as I got into this, I figured there's a much, sort of bigger story to tell about the actual system itself.
Well, tell us about the 9/11 workers and how you got involved with all of these people who've gotten sick. We just came from one of your first showings before the premiere of the film with 9/11 emergency responders who are sick.
Right. Well, as you know, those of us who are in New York here, we're, since 9/11, a lot of these workers who ran down there to help on 9/11, who were not city employees or state employees, but were just volunteers. I mean, some people got across from New Jersey and came and helped. They were maybe volunteer firefighters from New Jersey, some were EMT volunteers, and they went down there to help. Some of them stayed there for months in the recovery effort, and they got all these illnesses, respiratory illnesses and things like that from breathing, the whole, while the EPA was saying, Giuliani was saying everything's fine down there, go ahead and breathe away. In fact, as we now know, it was very toxic down there, and hundreds, perhaps even thousands, have suffered as a result of the toxicity in the air at the time. And then to find out that our own government and all these 9/11 funds won't provide any help to these volunteers because they weren't employees of the city. So they've been going through all these illnesses, some of them not even seeing a doctor or can't afford the operations or the things that they need, the medicines they need, because they don't have health insurance, and they can't work now, so they're disabled. And then they have to go through a whole rigmarole to try and get Medicaid. It's just, making them go through hoop after hoop. Very sad thing to see. And so we got to know some of them, and at the same time, I saw this thing on C-SPAN where Senator Frist had gone down to Gitmo because they wanted to show how, we're taking good care of the detainees. They're getting all top of the line prisoner treatment. And one of the things that he wanted to remark on, Mr. Frist, was how good the health care was.
Dr. Frist.
Yes, excuse me, yes, of course, Dr. Frist. There's another doctor. He then presented this list of, here's all the colonoscopies that we've been doing. Of course, the first thing I heard when I heard that, I thought, colonoscopies. Hey, most of these detainees are, in their 20s and 30s. You're not really, you don't necessarily have a colonoscopy till you're 50. So that should have been the first clue right there. Something was amiss at Gitmo. But he has this whole list, Amy, of how many teeth cleanings they've done of the detainees, how many root canals, they do nutrition counseling.
Did he talk about the force feedings of fasting prisoners?
Yeah, well, of course, that's what's called nutrition counseling. And but so he made this as part of this big thing about how wonderful they're treated there, and we shouldn't worry at all about them. Well, of course, irony built upon irony here, and I thought, well, here we have the 9/11 rescue workers who can't get any health care. Here they are trumpeting how they have free universal health care, dental care, eye care, nutrition counseling for the detainees. And I thought, well, why don't we just take our 9/11 workers down to Gitmo and see if we can get some of that free health care they're bragging about. And so essentially, when you see the film, I don't want to give the whole thing away, but that's essentially what we go to do.
How did you get there?
Geez, I wish I could tell you. I'm being investigated now by the Bush administration for this this trip I took, which they said that we went to Cuba, but my point is, no, we were going to Guantanamo Bay, which you claim is American soil. So we never really left America. We pulled out of Miami in the boat, and we ended up in Guantanamo Bay, which you claim is American waters. And so, but of course, we ended up then in, the actual nation of Cuba, and you'll see in the film the wonderful treatment that the 9/11 rescue workers and the others I got from the Cuban doctors and the Cuban healthcare system. But so now they're investigating me, and you've been there. Have you ever received this letter threatening civil and criminal action against you, or probably?
I did not.
Yes. Well, it's not fair. Well,
I didn't.
You're Amy Goodman. You should get the first letter.
I'm Amy Goodman. Our website's democracynow.org. Check it out for the full interview. Thanks for joining us.